In the quiet red earth village of Umuocha, where the sun baked the soil into cracked clay tiles and the scent of wood smoke and ripening plantains hung permanently in the air, a person's worth was measured in two things: the yam yield of their barn and the weight of their reputation. Here respect was your surname, carried as carefully as a calabash of palm wine, and a family's honor was a compound wall, painstakingly built over generations. Within the largest compound, marked by a towering ancient Iroko tree, lived Chief Okoro and his late life blessing, his daughter Adama. Chief Okoro, a man with a voice that could silence the noisy night crickets and a bearing straight as a palm trunk, had been blessed with sons, strong dependable men who tended his vast farms. But it was upon the birth of Adama, arriving after a line of male children and the tragic passing of his wife, that the chief felt the ancestors smile directly upon him. She was not just a daughter, she was his living breath, a final precious gift. He named her Adama, beautiful daughter, and from her first wail, she was wrapped in a cotton of pure devotion. While other daughters in Umuocha learned the rhythm of survival, rising before dawn to fetch water from the stream, their backs bending under the sun to weed cassava patches, their fingers learning the intricate dance of twisting fofo, Adama's life unfolded to a different melody. Her hands, soft and unblemished, were adorned with intricate henna patterns, not calluses. Her laughter was a bright, careless cascade that tumbled over the mud walls of their compound, a sound so free it drew both smiles and sidelong glances. Chief Okoro, blinded by a pride that softened his stern features whenever she entered a room, poured the bounty of his wealth into her alone. She wore the finest, most vibrantly patterned ankara, brought back specially from the bustling Onitsha market, each outfit a declaration of her status. While her peers wore simple leather slippers, her feet slid into imported sandals that whispered against the earth. The chief's indulgence was his language of love. When the letter came from a prestigious city college, a feat unheard of for a village girl, he slaughtered the fattest ram in celebration. "My Adama will not just be beautiful," he boomed to the gathered villagers during the feast, "she will be brilliant. A shining light for Umuocha." The elders nodded, chewing thoughtfully, but their eyes, wise and weary, held a different conversation. They watched Adama sashay through the village, her nose subtly tilted upward, barely acknowledging the greetings of those she deemed beneath her. She carried plates of food from her mother's memorial with a regal distance, her mind already far away, dreaming of city lights and foreign concepts. To the young men of Umuocha, she was an untouchable goddess, a vision of lace and ambition. To the mothers, she was a cautionary tale whispered over cooking fires. "See how the bird raised in a golden cage forgets how to build a nest," they would murmur. The village elders, sitting under the ukwa tree to adjudicate disputes, would watch her pass and exchange proverbs like valuable coins. "A tree grown only for beauty may yet fall to the weakest storm," one would say, his voice like dry leaves. Another would add, nodding slowly, "The finger that points to the sky forgets the palm that feeds it." But Chief Okoro heard none of it. To him, her every whim was justified, her every desire a command. Her departure for the city was a day of profound mixed emotions for Umuocha. As the rusty taxi billowed dust down the only road out, Adama looked ahead, her eyes on the horizon, never once looking back at the father who stood, a solitary, proud figure until the dust settled and the village was quiet again. She was the golden child, polished to a dazzling sheen, but the materials of her character, resilience, gratitude, humility, had been left unformed, swapped for vanity and entitlement. The stage was set, and the ancestors themselves leaned in, watching, waiting for the first crack in the gilded facade. The day Adama returned to Umuocha, the village sensed a shift in the air before the rusty taxi even came to a halt. It was not the triumphant homecoming Chief Okoro had plastered across his compound walls with fresh palm fronds and a new coat of white chalk. She stepped out, and a collective silent inhalation traveled through the onlookers. Her hair, once braided in elegant traditional patterns, was now cut in a sharp asymmetrical bob, dyed a color that echoed rust. She wore skinny jeans that seemed painted on and a top that left little to the imagination, a stark, jarring contrast to the flowing wrappers and head ties of the women who had gathered. But the transformation was more than fabric deep. Adama had returned not with a degree, as her father's countless goats and yams had paid for, but with a stranger's heart encased in a shell of urban glitter. Her speech, once the melodic Igbo of her home, was now peppered with jarring English slang and a forced nasal accent that twisted familiar words into foreign sounds. "Daddy, this your village is too much. No light, no network. It's giving archaic," she'd say, her laughter a short hollow sound that didn't reach her eyes. Those eyes, once bright with curiosity, now held a constant weary disdain for the village rhythms, the crow of the cockerel at dawn, the rhythmic pounding of mortars, the gentle hum of evening prayers. Her desires had mutated. They were no longer for fine Ankara but for things packaged in expensive branded bottles, perfumes that smelled of chemical gardens, creams to lighten the skin the ancestors had given her, and expensive gadgets that required a constant electricity Umuocha couldn't provide. Chief Okoro's vast barns, once the envy of the clan, groaned under the weight of her financial requests. "Bah, just sell the old plot by the river," she'd suggest casually, as if asking for a cup of water. "I need a new laptop. This one is already last season." His initial pride curdled into a thick, cold worry. His warnings, gentle at first, then firmer, were met with rolling eyes and exasperated sighs. "You're so traditional, Daddy. The world has moved on. Must we worship every old stone and tree?" The chasm between them yawned wide, but the final unforgivable disgrace was carved during the New Yam Festival, the most sacred event in Umuocha's calendar. It was a day of pure white clothing, of deep gratitude to Allah, the earth goddess, and of solemn communion with the ancestors. The entire village was gathered in the central square, a sea of reverent silence as the eldest Dibia, his body a map of ancient lines, raised a trembling hand over the new yams. His voice, a guttural invocation older than memory, called upon the spirits of the land, thanking them for the bounty and seeking their continued blessing. The air was thick, sacred, pregnant with a silence so profound one could hear the rustle of a leaf. Then, a violent electronic shriek tore through the moment. A raucous foreign tune, all synthetic beats and profane lyrics, blared from a damask-sequined handbag. The assembly jolted as if struck. But the horror was just beginning. With an impatient click of her tongue, Adama fumbled for the phone, turned her back fully on the shrine and the speechless Dibia, and answered. "Hello? Yeah, I'm in this dull village ceremony thing," she said, her voice a loud, jarring whisper that carried in the dead silence. A giggle followed, sharp and brittle as breaking glass. Time stopped. The earth under their feet did not just seem to crack in shame, it felt as if the very soul of Umuocha had been publicly flogged. The Dibia lowered his hand, his eyes wide with a fury that was spiritual, ancestral. The elders stared, their faces masks of cold, grim judgment. All eyes then turned to Chief Okoro. The man who stood like a Iroko tree, now visibly splintered. His proud shoulders, which had borne the weight of leadership for decades, crumpled inward. The vibrant red cap on his head seemed to dim. In that single act, his daughter had not merely broken a ritual or been disrespectful. She had taken the collective heart of her people, their most sacred moment, and tossed it in the dirt with a careless, cosmopolitan laugh. The poisoned honey of the city had not just spoiled Adama, it had been used to defile the village altar. The golden child was now a vessel of profound disgrace, and the price would be levied not just on her, but on the name Okoro itself. The consequences were as swift and merciless as a harmattan wind. Umuocha did not shout its judgment, it enacted it in a chilling unified silence. Overnight, the Okoro compound became an island of disgrace. Neighbors who once lingered at its gate for favors now crossed the path to avoid it. The women no longer stopped to greet the chief's household. At the village council, Chief Okoro's carved stool remained empty, his presence once central, was now a discomfort. The elders, in a quiet conclave under the aqua tree, had not banished him, they had simply made him invisible. His titles were not spoken, his counsel never sought. Stripped of his standing, he became a ghost in his own home, moving through the echoing rooms where Adama's laughter once rang, now replaced by a silence that gnawed at his spirit. He saw the pity in the eyes of his sons, and it was a poison sharper than scorn. Adama, meanwhile, fueled by a final furious pride, packed her glossy suitcases. "This primitive place doesn't deserve me," she hissed, believing the city that had remade her would now embrace her as its own. But the city was a different beast when one arrived without a father's funds. The friends from the clubs, who had loved her generosity. evaporated like morning dew when her coals became pleas for a place to sleep. The sleek boutiques and restaurants she had frequented now saw only a desperate girl in last season's fading fashion. Her charms, which had worked in the glow of Chief Okoro's money, were now just entries in a ledger of debt. Landlords locked her out, and her phone, that instrument of her greatest shame, went dead, cutting her final tie to a world that had only ever wanted her consumption, not her company. The rain that found her was a cold, indifferent city rain, soaking through her thin jacket. She huddled under a shop awning, shivering, watching well-dressed strangers hurry past without a glance. In that piercing loneliness, the truth, sharp and undeniable, finally broke through the facade. The city's freedom was a cage of relentless want. Her modernity was a shallow performance. She had not been brave, only ungrateful, not independent, only lost. The memories she had scorned, the scent of her father's ogbono soup, the solid safety of the compound walls, the sacred rhythm of the village year, flooded her with an ache so profound it stole her breath. She had traded a deep anchoring root for a glittering weightless leaf, and the wind had taken her nowhere. One pale dawn, with blistered feet and a spirit ground to dust, she crawled back to Umuocha. There was no taxi this time. She walked the final familiar miles, her suitcase discarded, her fine clothes mud-stained and torn. The village awoke to see her, a spectral figure, a broken imitation of the girl who had left. Whispers trailed her like a wake, but she heard nothing but the pounding of her own shame. She pushed open the unpainted wooden gate of her father's compound. Chief Okoro sat on a low bench in the courtyard, staring at the iroko tree as if reading his life story in its bark. He looked older, the lines on his face deepened into ravines of grief. Adama did not speak. Her strength gave way, and she collapsed forward, not at the throne of a chief, but at the feet of a weary, heartbroken man. The red earth, which she had once found common and dirty, stained her knees and mixed with the torrent of her tears. She pressed her forehead to the ground, her body racked with silent sobs. For a long moment, there was only the sound of the morning birds and her ragged breath. The chief looked down at his spoilt daughter, this hollowed-out vessel of his greatest hope and deepest failure. His anger had burned out, leaving only a grief as old and weathered as the hills surrounding them. He saw not the defiant city girl, but the child who had once fallen and run to him for comfort. The disgrace was absolute, the harvest of his indulgence bitter beyond words. Slowly, heavily, he leaned forward. His hand, calloused and broad, did not strike. It came to rest, trembling slightly, on her heaving head. It was not an absolution, that would take years, but it was an acknowledgement. A first, fragile thread spun between the ruins of two prides. The healing would be painful, and quiet, and long. It would begin with this touch, in the red earth of home, where all true things, even forgiveness, must eventually take root.
And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to Folktale by T Vibes.